Yo, what is going on, Headliner Nation? Your boy Kyle back with the Fantasy Headliners, and today's video is going to be an absolute monster. I've seen the comments. You guys are telling me to leave Banger to Jake, even though I'm the one that originally said Banger. It's okay. It's fine. Jake can have it. I will come up with something else. But today's video is going to be great. Absolutely amazing, because we are going to be breaking down what does it take to be a top 12 running back, and then we're going to put the guys in order of where they could potentially finish. If you watched my wide receiver video like this one the other day, this video is going to be twice as amazing, because there are some incredible nuggets in this video that you are going to want to have armed with, whether you still are going to be drafting this offseason or just for future reference. This video is going to be crazy, so hit the like button so you don't forget the information. But I got a giveaway that I got to throw out there real quick. We've got the Mike Evans cleat giveaway going to Mickey Martinez. Mickey, congratulations for winning the Mike Evans autographed cleat. Make sure everybody out there right now listening that you head over to our friends Pristine Auction and you sign up for a free account over there using code word headliners, because they're going to give you a $10 coupon towards your first purchase. You are going to want to make sure that you have that signed up, because a majority, if not 95% of our giveaways, if not more really, are going to be from Pristine Auction this year. And if you want to have an opportunity to win them, you need to have an account over there. So make sure that you go do that. Who can be a top 12 running back? What are the top 12 running back rankings? We are not another boring, monotone, throw a list up on a screen and just say, hey, this is what we think type of show. No. We dive into it, and I am diving into the statistics and points needed for a running back to be an RB1 in today's NFL, and you are not going to want to miss out on any of it. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button. As you're watching the video, leave a comment down below on who you think that, they're not listed in this video, but could propel themselves up into RB1 status this year. But first and foremost, what makes an RB1? Well, that's a good question, because a lot of times I see people out there just throw out so-and-so should be a top 12 running back, so-and-so. But do you actually know what it takes to be a top 12 running back? Like, you can say somebody needs to be a top 12 running back. You could disagree with the rankings, but do you actually know? Have you sat down and gone through the statistics to understand what a running back needs to do to be in the top 12? Well, I went through the last 3 years worth of data and found out what are the statistics averaged out among the top 12 running backs each year. Well, in 2019, the average for top 12 running backs in fantasy football were 245 attempts, 1,146 rushing yards, 72 targets in the passing game, catching 57 of those for 491 receiving yards, and 11 total touchdowns. Those were the numbers that you averaged out to be as an RB1 in 2019. What about in 2020? In 2020, 239 attempts, 1,139 yards, but a big drop in the passing game. Only 54 targets, 42 receptions, 328 receiving yards, but a little bit of a step up in touchdowns, hitting 12 total touchdowns there. Well, what about in 2021? It's interesting, because in my wide receiver video the other day, I had made some comments and people were like, well, Kyle, they got more stats because they had an extra game. I got that, and maybe I wasn't 100% clear on what I meant by it, but it's interesting that that got brought up, and then we take a look at 2021 and we actually saw a decrease even with the extra game. Now, one of the reasons for that is we were missing a Christian McCaffrey, who in, 2019 had put up ridiculous numbers that kind of helped propel some of the things that you see here, right? He kind of offset that a little bit. Saquon Barkley wasn't inside the top 12. We saw a little bit of a drop-off from some guys who had been in there recently putting up monster volume. Derrick Henry, another one of those. So in 2021, the average running back one had 233 attempts, 1,025 rushing yards, 62 targets, 52 receptions, so a little bit of a bump up in the passing game than what we saw the previous year, 395 receiving yards, and 12 total touchdowns. The one piece of information I would love you all to take away from this. We get this all the time, especially like about a Nick Chubb. Oh, Nick Chubb doesn't have enough passing upside or enough receiving upside to be considered a top 12 running back. We hear that all the time, and it's absolutely false. Because if you look at the information here, number one, 2019 was extremely offset because of the insane 100 targets that Christian McCaffrey got in the passing game. All right. We've seen some guys get insane work in the passing game. But just because Christian McCaffrey gets that doesn't mean it should ruin it for the rest of the running backs. And that's what it has done. Guys at the top of the tier putting together incredible once-in-a-lifetime seasons, making you say, oh, just because so-and-so can't reach that doesn't mean that they're worth a first-round pick. Because the real thing that we're looking at, the real thing that's going to make you a first-round running back, what's consistent here, ladies and gentlemen, it's the attempts, it's the rushing yards, and it's the total touchdowns. The total touchdowns is the big thing to being a top-shelf running back. If you can get the top touchdowns, you are good. So, for instance, in 2019, Christian McCaffrey and Aaron Jones both had 19 touchdowns. Both were insane in the passing game, right? Derrick Henry had 18, and he was right there at RB3 with those guys. Zeke and Dalvin Cook were the same way. A majority of their touchdowns came on the ground, but they were top 5 running backs because they were scoring touchdowns. Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook, again, a majority of their touchdowns in 2020 came on the ground, 17 apiece for total touchdowns. Last year, Jonathan Taylor barely did anything in the passing game. That's interesting that we say guys have to have passing upside because Jonathan Taylor doesn't really have that much in the passing game. He had 20 total touchdowns last year. Austin Eckler had 20 total touchdowns last year. Both of those came majority on the ground. Joe Mixon's a majority came on the ground. James Conner at 18, a majority came on the ground. The big difference that makes you a running back one is not the receiving work. Receiving work might make you an elite top of the draft pick, but it is the touchdowns that make you a solid RB1. Boom! Drop the mic, ladies and gentlemen, because that is what I just did. The average running back one season over the last 3 years, 239 attempts, 1,103 rushing yards, 62 targets and 50 receptions, 404 receiving yards, 12 total touchdowns. It is not the receptions and the receiving yards that make you an RB1. Those help make you an elite RB1. But when we say Nick Chubb is a back of the end RB1 type of guy with upside, that's absolutely accurate because he has the rushing yards, he has the touches, and he scores touchdowns. Do you want me to throw this in your face even more, doubters? Well, here's the thing. Let's take a look at the split between RB1s through 6 and RB7 through 12. Look at the numbers. Yes, there is a little bit of a bump up in the targets and receptions. It is the total touchdowns that you see there that pushes you up further and further. And of course, it's 1,210 rushing yards compared to 995. So yes, I understand what you all mean, wanting elite volume and things of that nature and wanting to have guys in the passing game. And when you talk about Christian McCaffrey, this is what, but Christian McCaffrey's being drafted as the number 2 overall running back. And Jonathan Taylor, who is a guy that honestly didn't get a whole lot of work in the passing game last year and probably won't this year, is still the bona fide number 1 overall. Oh, by the way, Derrick Henry is number 3 right now, followed by Austin Eckler and then Cooper Kupp. So this season, more than any, we are actually seeing guys pivot to looking towards as much volume on the ground as possible because they are starting to understand that. I would say a majority of you listening to this video right now understand that concept, but there are quite a few of you that continue to regurgitate the fact that you can't draft a guy with no receiving upside in the first round because they can't be an RB1 without him. And that is absolutely inaccurate and false in all sense of the word. We know that the top 1 through 6 running backs are going to be absolutely elite in volume, yards, and touchdowns. That's another reason why our philosophy here to draft running backs early is reinforced by these numbers here, because you're sitting at the top of your draft and you're thinking about a Cooper Kupp, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. These numbers right here show you that if you can draft a guy that is a top 6 running back, your production is going to be a lot better, especially when you take a look at these total touchdowns. These total touchdowns right here are what push people up to elite status. Not the targets, not the receiving yards, not the receiving touchdowns. It is the total touchdowns. If guys are running the ball in on the ground, it gives them just as much upside as any guy catching passes. But in terms of points, what makes you an RB1? What makes you a running back 1 through 4, 5 through 8, 9 through 12, and then just like wide receivers, I also wanted to include those fringe guys. What does it look like? Well, this is, again, why you get your running backs early, because the difference between RB1 through 4 and RB13 through 16 is a pretty big drop-off. That's a pretty big drop-off right there. In fact, the drop-off here is a lot less significant than what it is at wide receiver, because if you remember that wide receiver video in 2019, the wide receiver 1 through 4 was only scoring 245 points compared to the 192.62 from the wide receiver 13 through 16. So again, the top tier running backs are going to be more valuable than the top tier wide receivers. It happens every season. What about in 2020? Just a little bit of a step down, 303 points averaged out for the top 4 running backs, down to 227, down to 195, and then a significant drop kind of at that back end there where you're taking a look at 177 now for running back 13 through 16. And again, compare those numbers in the 2020 season to wide receivers, 303 for running backs 1 through 4, only 271 for wide receivers 1 through 4. All right. Then things get a little bit closer. The running back 5 through 8 drops to 227, where the wide receiver 5 through 8 drops to 226. So again, as you start to come down, the talent pool closes in, making wide receivers a better bang for the buck later in your draft than your running backs. Get your running backs early. I don't know how many times we can say that, but we're going to continue to do it. And then in 2021, even with that extra game there, quite a drop-off in 2021, all the way down to 298. When you take a look at the wide receiver 1 through 4 in 2021, it's 288. So again, those numbers get a little bit closer, but again, you were missing guys like Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, guys that can kind of push the limit at the very top. So keep an eye on that as you look through those things and determine whether or not those are going to be the best guys to take in your draft. So the 3-year average right now at the running back position through 1 through 4 is 306 fantasy points, followed by 233, 205, and 189. And those numbers, again, kind of match up with the wide receivers. Almost 30 more points per game, or almost 30 more points from running backs 1 through 4 than wide receivers 1 through 4. Almost 10 points more wide receiver 5 through 8. Running back 5 through 8 compared to wide receiver 5 through 8. And then you get a little bit closer is running back 9 through 12 and wide receiver 9 through 12 are both at 205. And then it's 189 for wide receiver or running backs and 191 for wide receivers. So things get a little bit closer there again, the further you fall in the draft. So what makes an RB1 and who fits the criteria? So we talked about it a few minutes ago, right? What is the average season from a running back 1 over the last 3 years? That average season is 239 attempts, 1,103 rushing yards, 62 targets, 50 receptions, 404 receiving yards, and 12 touchdowns. Now, I use my friends over at Run the Sims for this. Justin Simmons, Pat Mayo over there at Run the Sims. Absolutely love those guys. They have a great setup over there, and they're very, very accurate. So I took a look at their offseason projections for the 2022 year, and I looked at it and I said, okay, out of all of the projections, who are the guys that will average just as much or more than every single category that you see listed right here? It was one player. It was Christian McCaffrey. That's it. That's it. He is the only guy projected by Run the Sims to touch every single category of an average RB1 over the last 3 years. And one of the reasons why people are still drafting Christian McCaffrey at the 1.02, even though he has issues with injuries the last 2 years. Nobody else is even close to this. Nobody. The only other people that were close were Jonathan Taylor, but he doesn't come close in the receiving yards, and Austin Eckler, but they've got him down in touchdowns this year and not as many attempts. That's it. That's it. That's what we've got. That is what we have got. But what about points-wise? Who fits the criteria points-wise? So I went through and I broke it down, okay? Out of the projections, even though guys aren't projected to touch all those stats that we saw, what are they projected in terms of fantasy points? Because realistically, that's what we're looking at, right? We're looking at fantasy points. We don't care how they get them. We just want them to get the fantasy points. Only 2 running backs came in at or above the 306.65 fantasy points that running backs 1 through 4 have averaged over the last 3 seasons. Jonathan Taylor and Christian McCaffrey. No surprise there. There's a rather large group, though, in the 5 through 8 range. So anybody that's projected to score less than 306 this year, but more than the 233.88 that was an average for running backs 5 through 8 over the past 3 seasons. Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, DeAndre Swift, Joe Mixon, Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, Leonard Fournette. Probably not a lot of names there that scream, what? Not a lot of people there where you take a look at that and say, I wonder what we've got going on here. Why are they so high? Aaron Jones is going to get his in the passing game. Leonard Fournette is going to be the main back. DeAndre Swift, we know he has the upside. He's got to take care of some of those vision issues that he has going on right now, and we need him to just be a little bit more consistent. What about running backs 9 through 12? These are guys that are projected to score more than 205, but less than 233. There's a fewer names here, but Nick Chubb, Alvin Kamara, Javonte Williams, James Conner, and then Cam Akers coming in. So Run the Sims believes that Cam Akers is going to give us a fully healthy season. Now, the one thing that may not draw into their projections are the injury concerns, are the comeback from the Achilles. Because when you do projections, you can project in missed games, but it's really hard to project in the way somebody bounces back from an injury. All right? So, with that being said, I don't agree with Cam Akers being there. But also, when it comes to projections, it's hard to project a comeback from Achilles injury. So I would get why they would have him in there. Being the lead back, being a guy that, as of right now, should be the lead back. But again, dealing with some injury concerns, Darrell Henderson looking a little bit better right now. We'll see how all that plays out. I'm still skipping on Cam Akers. James Conner and Javonte Williams popping up here. I think for a lot of people, you might be looking at, especially with James Conner being like, no, I can't see James Conner putting up the same number. Well, the projections are showing that it absolutely could happen. Well, what about those fringe guys? What about those guys that can score more than 189 points, but less than 205, putting them right towards the back end of an RB1, high RB2 status? That's going to be Travis Etienne, Ezekiel Elliott, Cordero Patterson. They still have projected for quite a bit of work this year. Saquon Barkley and Breece Hall finishing up here as well. So, again, with all the information provided, I wanted to actually break it down for everybody. What does it take to be an RB1? You know, ranking these guys out, what does it take for them to get to these type of statuses? That is where I look at it and I say, it's not the receiving. I mean, I just showed you all the numbers. Does the receiving help? Yes, and it makes truly elite guys very top of the funnel. But it's not needed for an RB1 status. It's not needed for upside. Scoring touchdowns is needed for upside. Getting in the end zone is what you want from your running backs if you don't have a top overall pick. Adding in some receiving absolutely helps. Absolutely helps the ceiling. But it is the touchdowns that you want. You want guys that are going to get in the end zone as much as possible. I don't care if it's on the ground or through the air. If you're scoring, you're going to be up here. That is what the numbers show us. And I am so glad I broke this down for you all, because I hope this really reinforces that to all of you, especially if you haven't drafted yet. Take this knowledge and dominate your draft with it. If you've already drafted, use this knowledge to maybe make trades or put yourself in a position to bring in some running backs that are going to score touchdowns. I guarantee we're going to go over all this again next offseason to help you understand one more time why it isn't the receiving that you have to always be worried about with the running backs. Hit the like button for me. Subscribe if you're new here to the Fantasy Highlight. If you just watch this video and you walk away from it not subscribing, I'm sorry, but you don't truly understand the knowledge that was just laid upon you right here. Because I guarantee you that there is not one other channel on YouTube that you can find that just broke it down for you the way that I did. Hit the like button, subscribe, leave a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on the video and the information provided to you. I'm going to get out of here. Stay safe, stay healthy. I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.
Analytics off the chain, all the channels not the same. Jake and Kyle, you know the name. Headliner Nation, we running the game. Y'all stuck on third down. Your content's plain Jane. Headliners on top now. We gonna move and change. Podcast off the rip. Draft guide, so legit. Fantasy world, our game tight. You know we about that chub life. Stuck in a rut and you need some motivation. Head to the channel for this Headliner Nation.
I'm a headliner.